Assalamu alaikum students. So let's begin our lesson for today with the differences between living and non-living things, and for this purpose we need to understand the characteristics of life. So we know that all living organisms are made up of cells. Organisms, they can move by themselves in a directed and controlled way. Organisms respire, and respiration is the release of energy through the breakdown of food substances such as glucose. Organisms are able to detect and respond to changes in their environment, which is called sensitivity. And then organisms grow. Growth is the permanent increase in the mass and volume of the organism. Organisms can reproduce their own kind. They can remove metabolic waste products through the process of excretion. They adapt to increase their chances of survival, and they gain energy and materials needed to make new living matter or protoplasm through the process of nutrition. Collectively, we can give an acronym for all these characteristics of life, which is Mrs. Green. These characteristic features distinguish a living organism from a non-living organism. Now let's move on to classifying living organisms. In order to study organisms, biologists they group living organisms according to their similarities and differences, which is known as classification. Classification can be of two types: artificial classification, in which organisms can be grouped according to the properties that are meaningful to humans, and natural or biological classification. This system is based upon the similarities and differences between organisms. Biological system of classification, it is easy to refer when we are identifying organisms. In this system of classification, organisms are first divided into 5 kingdoms, such as kingdom Prokaryotes or the bacteria. They are also classified into the next kingdom, which is kingdom Protoctasts. It includes a collection of single-celled organisms and some simple multicellular ones, such as the seaweeds. Then they have kingdom Fungi, like the mushrooms, toadstools and molds. Kingdom Plantae, which includes all the green plants on planet Earth. And last but not the least, kingdom Animalia, which includes us humans and all other animals. Within each kingdom, organisms are further classified into several phylums. A phylum is made up of several classes. Each class is made up of orders. Each order is made up of families, and each family consists of a varying number of genus. A genus has usually several species. Organisms within a species can breed to produce offsprings. Here is an easy way to remember it. Kate, please come over for great spaghetti. Talk about the biological system or the biological classification of a human being. We belong to kingdom Animalia. Our phylum is Chordata. The class for humans is Mammalia, the order is Primate, family is Hominid, genus is Homo, and species is Sapien. In the natural system of classification, organisms are classified according to a graded scale or a hierarchy, and the resemblance between organisms becomes much closer as we go down the scale of classification. For instance, it is easy to distinguish one family from another family. It is also easier to separate different genera, but different species may be more difficult to differentiate. In addition to the 5 different kingdoms of living organisms, there are viruses. Viruses are the smallest of organisms, and they are on the borderline between the living and the non-living world. So let's talk a little bit more about viruses. Usually viruses, they occur in many different shapes, sizes and types. All viruses, they have a central core of RNA or DNA, which is surrounded by a protein coat. This protein coat of a virus is known as the capsid. Viruses, they do not have nucleus, cytoplasm, other cell organelles, or even a cell membrane, though some of them, they have a membrane outside their protein coat. So we cannot classify viruses as living organisms. We cannot say that they are cells, because they do not feed, respire, excrete, grow, or even perform any other vital activity, or they do not show any characteristic feature of life. Viruses, however, they do reproduce, but only inside the cells of living organisms or inside the host cell. Let's move on to the other kingdom, which is kingdom Prokaryote, or the kingdom Bacteria. So bacteria, they are very small organisms consisting of single cells, and their size could be as small as 0.01 millimeter in length, and they can only be seen by high powers of microscopes. Their cell walls are not made up of cellulose like in the plant cells, but they are made up of complex mixtures of proteins, sugars, and lipids. A bacterial cell, it contains a single chromosome, which consists of a circular strand of DNA, and the chromosome, it is not enclosed in a nuclear membrane, but it is coiled up to occupy part of the cell. So the chromosomes are present in the bacterial cell but not enclosed in a nucleus. Flagella is present, which helps the organism to move. The flagella, it can flick, and so the bacterial cell can move about. Method of reproduction is asexual, usually by binary fission or cell division. Then we have our next kingdom, that is the kingdom Protoctasts. Protoctasts are again single-celled unicellular organisms, and their chromosomes are enclosed in a nuclear membrane to form a nucleus. So this is the major difference between kingdom Protoctasta and kingdom Prokaryote. Some of the Protoctastas, example the Euglena, they possess chloroplasts, and they can photosynthesize. That means they can make their own food. Some of the Protoctasts, they resemble animals in their mode of nutrition, and they are known as the protozoans, like the amoeba. Examples include amoeba, paramecium, euglena, and even the chlamydomonas. Our next kingdom is kingdom fungi, and the special thing about kingdom fungi is that it consists of both unicellular and multicellular organisms. The most fungi, they are usually made up of thread-like structures, which are known as hyphae, and these hyphae, they collectively form a mesh-like structure, which is called a mycelium. Fungi, they usually digest their food outside their bodies. Their cell walls are made up of chitin. Nucleus is present in kingdom fungi, and they reproduce by means of spores. The method of reproduction is both sexual and asexual in fungi. They are used in recycling, food industries, medicine industries or pharma industries, and as biocontrol agents. Let's move on to our next kingdom, which is the plant kingdom or kingdom Plantae. So kingdom Plantae, it includes all the plants on planet Earth. They are multicellular eukaryotic organisms, and they consist of a rigid structure that surrounds the cell membrane, which is known as the cell wall. We can classify the plant kingdom into two major categories, the seed-bearing and the seedless plants. Seed-bearing plants can be further subcategorized into Gymnosperms and Angiosperms. Gymnosperms are the non-flowering plants and Angiosperms are the flowering plants. Gymnosperms usually consist of conifers and Angiosperms they consist of all of the types of flowering plants. Seedless plants includes Bryophytes and Polycinophytes. Bryophytes includes mosses and liverworts and Polycinophytes include ferns. The seed-bearing class Angiosperma can be further subcategorized on the basis of presence of seed leaves into Monocots and Dicots. Some of the characteristic features shared by all plants in kingdom Plantae are as follows. They are non-motile. They are usually reproducing by means of sexual methods. They follow the autotrophic mode of nutrition in which they prepare their own food by the process of photosynthesis. They all are multicellular organisms, eukaryotic organisms with cell walls and sap vacuoles. They contain chlorophyll, which is the green pigment, and this chlorophyll helps them to photosynthesize. And they have all basic cell organelles present in them. Now we are going to talk about each of the class of the plant kingdom in detail. Let's begin with Bryophytes. Bryophytes are the seedless plants. They do not reproduce their system. They are found in both land and aquatic habitats. Therefore, we call them as the amphibians of kingdom Plantae. Because amphibians are those animals which can live on both land and water. Then they have differentiated plant body into the stem and leaf-like structures. Then comes Polycinophytes. Polycinophytes, they have again well differentiated structures. They have a vascular system as well. Polycinophytes usually they include ferns. Ferns, the stem is usually entirely below the ground and it takes the form of a structure which is known as rhizome. Now let's come to Gymnosperms. The word gymno means naked and sperm means seed. This means that they have naked seeds. Their body is well differentiated and they have a vascular system. Their seeds, they are not enclosed within the fruit. That is why we call them as plants with naked seeds. Next category is Angiosperms. Angiosperms are flowering plants. Flowering plants means that they are seed-bearing plants with well-differentiated or a plant body. They also have a vascular system, and their seeds they are enclosed within a fruit. That is why we call them as flowering plants. The word angio means covered and sperm means seed. So their seeds are covered or enclosed within the fruits. These angiosperms can be further categorized into monocots and dicots.